Hello, dear friends. I'm at the synagogue in Tel Aviv, Beit El, Tel Aviv International Synagogue. I'd like to talk about Parashat Lekh. And I want to start off, well, not start off, but I want to actually concentrate on a Midrash. There's a famous Midrash that is brought in Midrash Raba. That's probably one of the older Midrashim, which are non-legal Midrashim, meaning they're just talking about topics in the five books of Moses and also in the Megillot and the five scrolls. And the Midrash Raba usually starts off with an introduction before the parsha, and they have a very famous introduction on Parashat Lekha, which I would like to read. And I brought the text in front here, and the text says, if I can slightly make it larger, just in case somebody wants to follow. In the Hebrew, I'll try to make it slightly larger. So the text says, of course, it quotes, and God said to Abraham, leave Lekh Lecha, go from your land, from your birthplace to the land which I shall show you. So Rabbi Yitzchak opens up his, possibly his sermon, his drasha, quoting a verse in Psalms 45:11. Listen, O daughter, and look, and pay attention, and forget about your people and your house of your father, because that's what Abraham does. He leaves everything. He leaves Ur Kasdim, and he also leaves Aram Naharaim on the way, and he goes towards the land of Canaan, where God is going to make him into a great people. And then Rabbi Yitzchak says, to what can this be compared to? To a fellow who's walking on the way from place to place, and he sees Bira Doleket. Now, Bira is like a house, a very large house, like a palace. Doleket. Now, the question is, what is Doleket? Doleket, the simple meaning is lit up. So lit up means, the simple interpretation is, sees lights in all the rooms. There are candles in all the rooms. So it's all lit up. So he says, can it be that this house, this palace, is without manhig, without some type of owner? I mean, it's all lit up. Heitzitz alav bala bira, the owner of the house, peeked out the window and saw him and said, I am the owner of the house. In the same way, Abraham, our forefather, looked around the world and said, can it be that this world is without a master, without an owner, without a creator? And the Holy One, blessed be he, peeked out and said to him, I am the master of the universe. Now, this is a very popular midrash, and I know of at least 4 different interpretations, which I want to offer at this point. The first 2 are a philosophical argument, and the second 2 are, then the third one is more Kabbalistic, and the fourth one is more modern. So I'm going to offer 4 interpretations. Interpretation number 1 is an argument, actually, between Maimonides and Chasdai Kreskas. Maimonides of the 12th century, and after him, Chasdai Kreskas of the 14th century. Maimonides understands this little midrash, the way he describes Abraham in the laws of Avodah Zarah, the laws against idol worship. He says that Abraham, at the age of 3 already, started looking around and trying to figure out who is the master of the universe. And by the time he was 40 years old, he realized that there really must be a God who is the master of the universe. And that's when God appeared to him and said, yes, I am the master of the universe. But Abraham was a looker, a seeker. He was on the spiritual journey to find God. And for Maimonides, that's also an intellectual journey to find God. Like he says in his Guide for the Perplexed, you have to understand physics and metaphysics and ask all the right questions. And then you'll understand that there must be a prime mover There must be a prima causa, a first cause, and that brought Abraham to realize that there was a God. So he gives this philosophical approach, very, very connected to 12th century philosophical thinking. And this is the way Abraham understands this midrash. On the other hand, we have Chasdai Kreskas in the 14th century, who's very critical of philosophy. He writes a book called Or Hashem, the Divine Light. In his book, he has actually a chapter where he criticizes Aristotelian physics. And remember, in the 14th century, if you criticize Aristotelian physics, everything else starts to crumble because the metaphysics is based on the physics. And a lot of the worldview is based on the physics. He's one of actually the early critics of Aristotelian physics. It will take until the 16th century, until the late 16th century, beginning of the 17th century, till Isaac Newton comes along to completely bury Aristotelian physics. But here we see an example of something quite early in the 14th century asking questions about the validity of Aristotelian physics. And Kreskas says, I disagree with Maimonides. I believe that maybe Abraham was a seeker and on a spiritual journey. I have no problem with that. But I don't think he found God through logical argumentation and through philosophy. That's not how you find God. And if God did not appear to him, he would have never found him. Because according to you, Maimonides, if he found God through philosophical argumentation, why does God have to appear to him? But obviously, God appears to him because it doesn't help the philosophical argumentation. And only when God appears to him, only through revelation, is there really real clarity, which is the point of Chasdai Kreskas. Yes, we ask questions in philosophy. It can teach us things about the world. It can also give us an inkling of what the answer might be. But without the clarity of actual revelation of a prophet, of Ruach HaKodesh, then a person really doesn't have clarity about things that are beyond the scope of human reason, beyond the scope of human perception. This is a famous argument from the Middle Ages. But then there is a third point of view. And this third point of view is Hasidic interpretation. And the Hasidic interpretation is of the Sfat Emet in the 19th century. Sfat Emet, in his book, that's Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Alter, in his book Sfat Emet, which are, a lot of them are Torah ideas that he had said to his community on Shabbatot and on festivals, written in the 1880s, many of them in the 1880s in the book. And he writes them down by himself, probably when Shabbat and the festival is finished. And he has an idea that comes along. He says it specifically on this midrash, but it's actually a motif in his thinking. He says, what did Abraham realize? What is the Bira Doleket? The way he interprets Bira Doleket is not a house lit up, but from the word lidlok, lama dalakta acharai, why did you run after me? As Jacob says to Laban in the book of Breshit, lama dalakta acharai. So doleket means to run. He sees a world where everybody is running. They're all looking for something. Everybody's running towards something. Everybody is seeking some type of satisfaction. Everybody is looking for something which is going to fulfill them, make them feel great about themselves, make them feel more human, make them feel more excited about life. And what is it? What is that thing which can give fulfillment and excitement about life? Says the Sfat Emet. Says people don't realize it. It takes a lot of introspection to realize it, but it's within you. There is a point within your soul which is connected to the upper worlds. And if you look inside yourself and realize that you have an inner soul and you have a connection to God, that is the greatest satisfaction, because that is the greatest meaning that you will find in your life. Or to put it in another way, it'll solve the question of the absurdity of life. What is the absurdity of life? The ultimate paradox of life. Because the whole world makes sense. The laws of physics, they all seem to be rational. The world seems to work like a clock. But there's one major paradox in human life which makes absolutely no sense. How can it be in a world which is full of such intellect and such organization that human beings are born in order to die? That is the ultimate paradox. And to quote the late Milton Steinberg of New York City in his book on the sermons that he gave on the Sabbath, Steinberg says the only way to explain, in an article he wrote called "To Embrace with Open Arms," says the only way to explain that paradox, he explains the paradox a little bit different, but it comes out the same. He says, we get into a world, and in this world we find relationships with people we love. We find love, we find family, we find friends. We have a lot of difficulties, but we find beautiful things in life too. But we all know that one day we're going to have to give it up. So everything in life that we're embracing, we have to embrace with open arms, because in the end, we're having to let go. And Steinberg says this is such a terrible paradox. The only way that it can make any inkling of a sense, if we put God into the picture and realize there's some meaning in our lives, and it's not in vain, and the relationships that we are creating are not in vain, and there's going to be some continuation in some fashion. So the Sfat Emet says that everybody is looking for this point, and they don't even realize it. Some people do. Those who understand what a spiritual journey is, they start realizing it and see the world differently, on a different level. And the last interpretation I'm going to offer is the interpretation of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, the late chief rabbi of Great Britain, who gave a different interpretation for the Bira Doleket. He said it's not a house lit up, a palace lit up. It is a palace burning, from the word Lekha, which is a fire. Abraham is in a world. He looks around, he sees corruption. He sees people taking advantage of each other, people stealing, unfortunately, even homicides, selfishness. He says, this is a world on fire. This is a world self-destructing. What is going on? And Abraham, as a believer in God, believes that this cannot be the way. God expected more of human beings. And he says, if I am a man of faith, I have to tell people they're doing it wrong. I have to show them that there's ways to see the world a different way. I have to show them the value of morality, the value of belief, the value of the good life, the value of being an ethical person, and how it can enhance their lives. Because to be a believer is not the opium of the masses, like Karl Marx thought mistakenly. Yes, it's true. A lot of leaders say, yeah, if they believe, then whatever happens, we'll say God did it. There's nothing to do. You can't question. No, that's not the way Abrahamic Judaism works. When we see corruption, when we see evil, we stand up and we want to fix it. And we're not going to tolerate it. That's what real belief is. Where we realize that we have to be self-propelled in our moral integrity, and we have to mobilize and take action against corruption and against things that are happening in life, and to educate the new generation how to live the good life, a life of ethics, of self-respect, of the respect for life, and with a connection to God. Now, I have to say that possibly his interpretation of Bira Deleket, even though it's a possible interpretation, might not be the simple meaning of Bira Deleket, but it definitely suits Abraham the best of all the interpretations, because this is why God chose Abraham. And this is why Midrash Raba says at the beginning of Genesis, Raba, at the beginning of Breshit, Vahi or Avraham, let there be light, that's Abraham. Because God got excited when Abraham came around. Because Noah did whatever God wanted. God wants to destroy the world. You're God. You do whatever you want. You just tell me what to do. But Abraham stands up to God and says, can the judge of all earth not do justice? That's not possible. Maybe in Sodom and Gomorrah, in those 5 cities, are there not at least 50 righteous people? Maybe 45, maybe 40, maybe 30, maybe 20, maybe 10. God says, unfortunately, Abraham, no. But God likes listening to this. He likes when human beings are willing to put their neck out and stand up for other human beings. That's how God gets excited. When you see a human being who got the point that faith in God means to stand up to corruption, to stand up to immorality, and to try to build and mobilize to make the world a better place to live. Shalom, shalom.